Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Spotlight On. I want to thank you for joining us. We're taking another interview this week, another new interview where we've been coming out with one each week. But this week we have a special guest. His name is Sean StarWars, and he's an artist out of Laurel, Mississippi, and he's practicing and has a studio gallery there. But we're very blessed to have him with us. Sean, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let everybody know a little bit about you and what you do?
Cool. Well, thanks, Derek. I make a lot of woodcuts. End of story. It was nice talking to you.
We're done. Thank you for joining us.
I love making woodcuts, so that's pretty much what I do. And I've been making woodcuts for 30 years or something, and it's really like just chipping away at the woodcuts and hanging out with my family is pretty much what it's all about. So, there's I have a lot to say about a lot of things, but I usually got to kind of ease into it a little bit, right? So. As soon as you ask me another question, it's not my name, I'll be good.
Yeah, absolutely. This grows. We will grow this into something.
Awesome.
Well, for those who might not be as familiar with woodcutting, tell us a little bit about that process.
Cool. Yeah. So, typically, the way I do it, I make a drawing with a Sharpie. I'm holding one right now. I draw directly onto a block of wood. I usually use birch plywood, but you can use just about anything that you can carve into. So I make a real quick drawing, and then I just use a bunch of different chisels, gouges, and just start carving away. You carve what you want to not be a part of the image, and what you leave behind is what's going to print. And, over the years, I've kind of gotten my notoriety, I guess, over the way that I do color woodcuts. And so I try to do a lot of color woodcuts and just kind of keep with my strength, I guess. But it's really fun because it takes just a lot of energy just to carve, and it doesn't, what I love about it, and we can talk more about that if we do, is that like my drawing skill was never that good early on, and it's still not that hot, but those tools are magic, and they do all of the heavy lifting for you, and so if you just bring the energy and cut into the wood, you're kind of guaranteed to have something that you can be happy with. It's kind of unique. So that's that.
Yeah, and you take that and you can make prints and T-shirts and canvas and fabric and whatever you really want to press onto it, right?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I love about printmaking. We're really lucky right now in this digital age that we live in. There's so many ways that you can get your images onto other surfaces that don't involve printmaking, or that, in addition to printmaking. But I still really love just the traditional ability to print on just about anything that you can run through the press. So I do a lot of prints on paper, of course, but then I print all my T-shirts. I print on wood a lot, so it's kind of ready to hang that way, But I just moved from where I was in the back of the house. My curtains were wood block printed in that little studio. So print on pants, print patches that you can sew onto shoes or whatever. It's for me, it's just a lot of fun. And just to see what else you can do with it. It's always an option to make a print and, tack it up to the wall, but then to see what else you can do is kind of fun too.
Yeah, your art's always so much fun. One of my favorite things about you have a nostalgic take on everything. And I'm a retro freak. I love your subject matter all the time. And awesome. Then even your what is it? Even when you're taking a subject that you created, it has that same nostalgic feel to me. Tell me a little bit about your inspiration.
Well, one thing is, because I've been doing this for a long time, I've kind of run through all the things that I really love, like I've made a hell of a lot of Star Wars woodcuts over the years, and, in the background, you can see this Frankenberry print, which is one of the ones that kind of made things happen for me a little bit. But, just loving being in thrift stores and flea markets and antique shops and, digging in the abandoned houses, and you never know what you're going to find. But just, now it's a little bit different because you just, you go on Google and you type in whatever you can think, and there's things that you thought existed and things that you had no idea existed, and so it's really cool. But even that, you kind of still have to know what you're looking for, and so I think something fun that I like to do with my students is to get them to look at, I used to take them to the libraries and look at the bound periodical collections, Old Life magazines or Saturday Evening Post or Sports Illustrated or whatever. And you can still do that, but you can also do a lot of that online, and so if you go just to the Google archives and just dig into Life magazine, they have every one, going back to the 30s. And if you have an idea what you're looking for, it's real easy. But if you just are browsing, you'll find things that appeal to you that you didn't know existed, or you didn't know the history of them. And so kind of always in a search for fun stuff like that. I just encounter a lot of things that I already was either kind of intrigued by, or just, you also get to learn a little bit along the way, Yeah. But yeah, I kind of think of what I'm doing as just like being maybe a perpetual 10-year-old, like I'm like the video games, comic books, just athletes, basketball player, just like the stuff that you would idolize if you're a 10-year-old, and it usually, every once in a while I'll kind of venture into adult content or adult ideas, but usually it's just more like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you were an alligator playing a video game, and so just like kind of keeping it at that like 10-year-old, 11-year-old brain level, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's the fun part of it. Your art is so much fun. Tell me about the Woodcut Funhouse.
Okay, so that's been kind of an evolving thing because I've lived here in Laurel for about 16 years, I guess, and we've loved it from the minute that we moved to Mississippi. It was just kind of a different thing, just getting to know our neighbors. When we lived in New Orleans, I couldn't tell you the people that lived next door to us in our shotgun. You just bang on the wall when they're being too loud, but you didn't really know anybody. And here, from the minute that we moved here, my next door neighbor, Gary, he's like, hey, I'm Gary. Let me help you unpack the U-Haul, and then here, have a beer. And then, hey, and then like you just had an instant best friend, and everybody in town has always just seemed that way, and so like we've really loved it here. And there's so many great things. We bought our first house here in Laurel, and that was super. Then as our family grew and we got a little bit crowded, we're looking, I always heard about people that, oh yeah, we used to live on 7th Street, and then we moved over to 5th Avenue, and it's like, really? You just moved 2 blocks over? And I thought that was so crazy. And then that's exactly what we did too, But when we bought our, I had my studio in the garage at the old house, and, it was a headache, but at least it was right there, for years and years. And then when we moved, I needed to find, I wanted a bigger space, but I needed a space because even though this house is bigger, it's just not set up really for a studio, right? And so we found a great place downtown, and this was right before, right before hometown kind of kicked in. The only people on my street, the only business on my street at the time was Ben and Aaron, from hometown. They had they had her studio there, and as it was, as they were developing the concept for the TV show and all that, it was still pretty desolate on our block downtown, and but anyway, so I was able to get a space, and it was fun. It was great. But about a year ago, the people that I was renting that space from, who also was on that TV show for an episode. It seems like everybody in town gets to get on there. But, anyway, so they told me that they were trying to sell the whole building. And so I knew that it was going to be a lot of work and I was going to have to do it quick when they did sell it. So I started to try to get out in front of it. And my mother-in-law in Louisiana has an extra house on their property that's just been sitting there for the 20 years that I've been married, you know. And I was like, why don't we just move the studio into there? We're here almost every weekend anyway, you know? And so so now I have a studio. It's functional. It's going to be a lot better than what I had. And it's going to allow me to do residencies and that kind of fun stuff. And, you know, like I had to leave this morning from there at like 5 this morning, you know, like I want to be there as much as I can, but I had to come back home. You know, but so I'm not downtown anymore, and really just the rent got to be so expensive because there's so much happening down there now. You know, that but trying to find a new space, it was just way more than I could justify, because I still really do a heck of a lot better online than I do locally. You know, and that's just, you know, that's just a part of what my experience has been the whole time that I've been here, you know. And it's always weird because I love Laurel and I love Mississippi and I love the community, but it's just like I'm just a citizen. It doesn't have a lot to do with the art for the either what, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't get a ton of support locally. But I'm also just not really I'm not generating the things that the people here want to the same.
Right.
It's you know, it's just the way that it is. You know, so that's the thing. That's the Woodcut Funhouse. And, you know, it's a little bit more fun now because I know I can do whatever I want to do to the space, but I pretty much could at the old space too, you know. It's just, I love being down there, you know, just watching people walk by while I was working, you know. Every once in a while, somebody come in and you talk to them for a minute or whatever. But I totally miss that. But I also miss having the space in the garage at the old house because, like, I could work right up until the minute the food was on the table. Yeah. You know, and even just when the studio was, I mean, I could be there in a minute and a half by car, but it's such a mental break. You know, or you could walk there in 7 or 8 minutes, but it's like, okay, now I need to leave. Now I need to, like, I got to be home at a certain time, or, you know, all of those things. And I miss that immediacy. And then it's way worse than that now because I do all my work at home and then I print on the weekends, you know. And so it's like, okay, when I go out there to Louisiana, it's just get my head down and crank out. And if I don't, then, you know, like I didn't work that hard this weekend. I just, you know, we played badminton. We just were like, we're playing around in the rain, you know, we had a nice relaxing weekend, but I didn't get anything done. And so I'm behind for the rest of this week. I'm just going to be thinking about the stuff that I didn't do that I needed to do, you know. But
yeah, I know that feeling really well.
Yeah.
Like, how many times do we have to push this off? Because I had pushed other things off.
Always, like, man, you know, it's like, and the thing is, you know, for me with printing, that's the least enjoyable. I mean, that's where you get whatever you're making. So that's cool. But for me, it's not like the fun is carving, you know, like I like sending the wood chips flying. I love that part. That's never bad, you know, but like having to mix the ink, that's just a chore, you know, even though you make a nice color, but it's like, okay, I got to do this, or, you know, or just the printing. You know, it's like crank, crank, crank. And it usually, if I'm there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I put off the printing, even though that's why I'm there. I put it off until like Sunday about 1 o'clock. And then I start printing, and then I realize how much fun. I should remember it was only a week ago, but it takes a lot of convincing. And then all of a sudden I'm covered in ink. I've made a bunch of stuff I'm excited about. And it's like, now I don't want to go. And now we have to go. You know, and so I wish, I feel like one day, I mean, one of two things will happen. We'll either move to Louisiana or we'll get another space here, and I can, who knows, but I've been in such a bad mood, for days. I just was like in a horrible mood, and I got into the studio, and almost instantly my mood changed. And I've never experienced that because I've always been able to be closer to making the work, so I never realized that, like, okay, because like I don't give myself days and days from being active, and even when you're drawing, you're being active, but it's not, I like that whole process: draw, carve, print, move on to the next one. And that's allowed me to be pretty quick paced with the way that I work, and it's allowed me to be pretty prolific. But like I said, I've never been away from that process. And now it's like, I can draw a little bit. I'll draw a little bit tomorrow, carve a little bit. And then 4 days later I'm printing, and there's kind of a disconnect, which I don't like that part.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your career arc, because you've had a really interesting one, and you started to mention a little bit about your what is it, crunch berries in the back, or
Frankenberry versus the clan. So look, here's this is, I tell this a lot, but I moved around a lot when I was a kid, but I basically grew up in Virginia, like the Virginia Beach, Norfolk area. And I'd never been, I guess, past South Carolina, going south. And so I chose to go to LSU for grad school. So I moved down to Baton Rouge, and it was a real culture shock, because it's so much hotter than Virginia, even though they like to think that they're in the South. And the cockroaches are so much bigger down here, and I hate them. So like I came down early so I could make that adjustment before grad school started, but I didn't really like it. Eventually I made a lot of friends, but it was kind of lonely at the beginning before school actually started. It was so hot, didn't have any money. And the graduate students wanted to have a grad student exhibition, and they wanted the theme to be white, right? Like, I don't know why they had to have a theme, but they wanted the theme to be white. And so I started drawing out. I had already been drawing a lot of Klansmen. I've always been influenced by Philip Guston, and I'm always looking at the pop culture stuff. So I draw this Frankenberry versus the Klan, and I carve it out and I print it up the next day. Because I work fast. And then they realized they didn't have any African-American grad students. And so they thought that it would be distasteful to call the show white. And I was like, okay, maybe so, but I already made my print, right? And so like I stayed with it, and I forget what they ended up changing it to, the theme. But so when I made this print before I even started taking classes at LSU, and I always say that's proof that they didn't teach me anything, right? And so, but I made like 50 prints that first semester. Because like I'm always working. And they told me, they're like, hey, my thing used to be, I'm going to make 50 prints so that I can have 25 good ones, because they're not all going to be good. And, 50% success rate's not bad, I guess. And they're like, well, how about if you slow down and only make 25 prints and let them all be good? And I was like, that'll never work. That's not how it happens. You can't control whether it's going to be good or bad. You just got to make it. And then it is what it is, So I didn't think of this print as being anything special when I made it, because like I made something the next day and the next day. But when we had the exhibition, and I thought, I was like, look, we're in Louisiana. We're in David Duke country. At the time, literally, in '96, there were still the campaign signs for David Duke. He had just failed to get elected as governor, And I was like, I bet everybody down here is in the Klan. And so they're going to be pissed off that I've got Frankenberry riding through their Klan rally, right? Instead, nobody cared, because nobody cares, right? I mean, like nobody really is paying attention to what's happening at a summer group grad exhibition on campus, you know? And so like a long time passed before anybody took notice of the print, you know? And so I didn't really think much of it, but I included it in this graduate symposium at this printmaking conference, right? I submitted it for this CD-ROM back when that was cutting edge technology, right? And nobody even wanted to go to the conference. It was in Ohio. Nobody else in the department wanted to go. So I didn't go either. And I was already thinking about quitting school because I really just didn't like it. You know, like I just wasn't digging it. And I'm sitting through in the department one night and I'm flipping through some art catalogs and I see the work of this guy named Tom Huck, who it turns out he's like probably the greatest living printmaker, right? And then I see this other guy named Bill Fick, right? And I'm looking at their work and I'm just loving the hell out of it. And I'm seeing so much just really kind of uninspiring stuff in the rest of these catalogs. But I kept seeing their work show up in multiple catalogs. And I was like, if these guys can make work and have places to show their work, then maybe there's hope for me too, you know? So I decided to stick it out. I'm still making prints. Well, anyway, so at that conference, it comes and goes, whatever. I come home Monday afternoon, and on my answer machine, right, it's a little beeping red button or whatever it's doing, and I press it, and it's Tom Huck, right? And, you know, my wife, Julie, was next to me, and I was like, that's Tom Huck. And we play it again, and it's like, hey, Sean, we saw Frankenberry versus the Klan at the conference. Bill Fick was right by my side. Michael Barnes, he's naming all these printmakers. He's like, we loved it. It was like the place erupted in laughter. Everybody wants to know, who in the hell are you, right? And so like we listened to that message so many times, and I couldn't believe that like this guy that's inspired me to stay in school has called me up and invited me to be in a project with him, right? And so like everything got real easy for me from that point on in school, because like the funny thing was the printmaking faculty just really didn't like me. They didn't care for me, even though they invited me, you know, they were the guys that brought me into the program. But everybody else, the art history people, the painters, the ceramics, everybody else was really crazy about what I was doing. And the printmakers just couldn't stand me, you know? So I was like, but it really doesn't matter because Tom Huck's digging it, right? He's got me under his wing. And so this whole thing kind of evolved called the Outlaw Printmakers, which was this thing that he created, right? And so he's handpicked a few people, you know, and this thing kind of coalesced, and I was lucky enough to be a part of it. And from that point on in printmaking, like it's such a tiny little world, it's not even really worth saying, but in printmaking, pretty much everybody in printmaking knows who I am because of that print, you know? And so it's such a different world because back in the mid-90s, there's always been rad art and there's always been rad printmaking, but there was a lot of really horrible, uninspiring, just not right for me printmaking happening in the mid-90s, right? And in most of the 80s for that matter. But like gig posters, comic books, like everything great in the world, you know, but in printmaking, it was just such a dud, you know? And so there was only a handful of people and you didn't really have the internet. You only saw them in these catalogs or whatever, you know, or postcards and that kind of junk. But you basically knew who was making anything that you were excited about, and there weren't very many people. And so like we really became a pretty tight group, even though we might only see each other every 2 or 3 years, you know? And even now I only see the guys like once a year, maybe twice, you know? But the thing that I love about printmaking is that it is a community, you know, and a print shop is a community. And that's the thing that I miss when I'm working by myself when I was downtown in Laurel, is that I never had anybody to, you know, my kids would help me, you know, or my wife would help me, but I never had that group of people that were all in there working together. And that's what printmaking means the most to me. You know, that's what I love about it more than anything. is that friendship and that community and all of that comes out of that, you know? And so over the last 20 years or whatever it's been, 25 years, whenever I graduated, all of my friends are printmakers. You know, like we've been through everything together, you know, the same group of guys, you know, you've got marriages and divorces and kids and, you know, and we've been lucky as we're getting a little bit older. Nobody's died yet. We're not that old, but like, you know, we haven't lost anybody in that group, but you know, like it's been our life. And that's what I always like to emphasize when I'm talking to students about what are you going to, like, what's really going to get you excited? What's going to be that thing that you grab onto and hold onto for the rest of your life? You're probably going to find it somewhere on campus, you know, in one of these art classes. You're going to find that thing you connect with, painting, ceramics, whatever. But you need to be there doing it, and you need to embrace the fact that that's your life. Like, you know, student, and then as a teacher, you see so many kids that just come in and they're just kind of going through the motions. Maybe they're meeting the requirements. Maybe they're not even doing that. They're not making enough work for all the assignments, whatever the case is. And then they blow through and they go on to something else, and you can see that they just haven't connected with something yet. And like, if you choose to be an artist, you probably, you know, like your parents are holding you as a baby. They're not looking at you and going, one day this guy's going to be an artist. You know, they're looking at a doctor or a lawyer, an astronaut, you know, something like that. You've already disappointed your parents. You might as well be good. You know, you might as well make the effort and make yourself happy. I was just 10 minutes before I got on here with you, talking with my 16-year-old daughter. She's got a friend at work that wants to be a writer, and her parents want her to be a teacher, and she doesn't think that she should have to do that. And I was like, man, I wish I'd gone into teaching earlier, because if you have a job, then you can do everything else that you want to do. But if all you have is your pride and your dignity as a creative person, that doesn't get you very far, you know? And I was way too, you know, when I was in undergrad, they had a really good art education program, but there was a real distinction between the art ed students and the fine arts students, right? And I was just a printmaker. I was just a fine arts guy. But I heard everybody always bad-mouthing the art ed people, and it didn't really make sense to me, but it kind of built a little bit of a wall of protection around that, where like I really put off wanting to just be a teacher. And then you hear people say, well, I want to be an artist, but I can always fall back on teaching, right? And when I hear that one, I really want to strangle somebody, you know, because like the hardest thing, and I think you're probably going to land on Mars before you get a job at a university, you know? I mean, it's stacked against you. There's 200 or more well-qualified candidates for every job. So when you get a job, you're really fortunate, but 199 people that were just as qualified didn't get it. It's really frustrating, and you're not going to fall back on teaching. That's really kind of what you would aspire to, you know, but I definitely kind of built a wall around myself where I didn't want to do that. And I was probably 30 before I started teaching. You know, when we moved to New Orleans, they were saying, oh yeah, man, they're so desperate for teachers. They're just ripping people off the streets and making them teach. Right. And I was like, okay, well, I want a job, you know, I guess I'm going to do it. And I spent my whole first summer at the Human Resources for Orleans Parish every day, listening to the Human Resources person talk to her husband about, I'm right outside her door. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to take any interviews today. I'm going to leave here about noon, right? I mean, every day I couldn't even get into her office, you know, and they weren't hiring people off the streets. But, you know, but man, if I'd have been teaching when I was 29, I think I might have been 35 by the time I actually started. Maybe I was 32. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But like, those are years that I could have been building everything that I've been building. You know, I could have, like, a minimum wage job is great if you're 17 or 16. right? But it's not that hot when you're 32 and you have a kid. It's you want more, you're willing to do more, and if you can get that job, if there's a job for you, you could take it. And teaching's a great job for a lot of reasons, but including the reason that it allows you to do all the other stuff that you're going to be hard pressed to afford if you're just an artist and you're too holy to teach, And so, I say go for it, right? But, just, printmaking, that can be your life. And it's hard. Like, so because we really just met, do you mostly paint?
Yeah, I get into a lot of stuff, especially when I teach and my kids come in. We do a lot more drawing and drawing focus than we do painting. Me personally, I do a lot of painting. It's just what everybody kind of knows me for, so I keep going with, but it's also the most frustrating thing that I do.
Yeah. For me, because I love to paint, and I haven't painted, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years. I love it, but for me, it's a process of like really building and building and building and painting over things. And, there's so much. And then with printmaking, it's so immediate that really draws me to it as well. Plus I'm better at it than I am at painting, but it's so much fun. It can be so enjoyable to do it, but the thing that is usually difficult in painting is the community is not built in.
No.
You have a studio and you're by yourself, and that's great. Yeah. That's great. But man, it is so nice. It's so nice to be in that print shop. If there's 8 people in there, and even if only 2 of them are working, there's some energy, and there's so many different aspects of what you can do in printmaking and feel like you're not doing anything. You can talk to your friends, but you're still drawing, or you're still graining a stone or whatever it is that lithographers do, but in painting, if somebody's talking to you, they're almost stopping you from working.
Yeah.
So like, as much as you want that camaraderie, you also want them to get the heck out so that you can get back to what you're doing, especially if you paint naked. But,
I've seen that guy that goes up and like hikes mountains. Have you ever seen it?
No.
Don't ever look it up. It's horrible.
Oh, no.
He goes up and hikes mountains, and he takes his little backpack and everything, and that's the only thing he takes.
Oh, wow.
And then he sets up at the top of a mountain and paints the scenery. But he doesn't have it brushes either.
So, wow. So I guess he's built in with a couple brushes, maybe.
So there's a gimmick for everybody. I gotta tell you, because he's doing better than I am selling Venus paintings.
Wow, that's funny.
Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on and sharing all of this with us about your journey, about, your frustrations with, teaching and with being away from the studio, along with all of what makes you happy. I think that it's really important for us as artists to hear other artists and to identify with other artists.
For sure.
With the pitfalls, along with the really high good moments, it comes all together. You can't get one without the other. Right. For anyone that's watching that wants to find out more about you or purchase some of your work, I know that you have the best T-shirts. I knew a little bit about you a while back, and then I just recently started really picking up and checking out what you've been doing, and I'm in the process of narrowing down my choices of T-shirts because I love them. I love every single one of them that you do. I think they're great. But where can people find all that stuff? Where can they find you and follow you?
Cool, thanks. Yeah, the SeanStarWars.com is like kind of my archive site, and then woodcutfunhouse.com is the e-commerce or whatever the hell you want to call it. That's where all the T-shirts and the prints and stuff are. But Instagram, like I think I do better on Instagram than on my website, because like you post some work and you say, hey, this is out there. And then, so that's pretty good these days. Advice wise, and I already said advice about embracing where you are and doing, and just like throwing yourself into it. And just as an extension of that, one is, it's good to have a website. It's good to have a website, but it's not as critical as it might have been 7 or 8 years ago because we have all these other places, But my biggest piece of advice is to, I mean, you could get really trite and say just go for it or just do it or any of those things, but don't listen to those voices that tell in your head or anywhere else that tell you not to do something, because there's a lot of sensitive souls out there in the world of art, people that are maybe a little tenuous about making some of those bold moves that you have to make that'll change your life, and it's really hard to like meekly knock on the door and say, hey, can I show you this thing that I've been doing, but with each nod that you get, with each pat on the back that you get, that knock gets a little bolder, until you're really confident. And printmaking has allowed me to feel like I can do anything in the world. I could go into any group and talk about anything in the world. It doesn't have to be a printmaking. Hopefully it won't be, but printmaking is what gave me that ability to do that, and just people are never going to tell you no personally. It's always, or almost never, right? Sometimes they just don't like you, but usually it's like, no, we can't use that right now. But once you're in front of somebody, you're in their mind forever, And so, hey, actually, we do have something coming up next month. You want to be a part of this, or you would be the perfect person for this other thing someone was talking about. And you just have to knock on those doors or send. I mean, even now, even with that advice, I'll think of somebody that I want to reach out to, an artist or a gallery or something, some kind of project, and I'll type the whole email up. And then instead of hitting send, I'll just undo the whole thing. And I'm like, I don't think they're really going to dig that, Yeah. And so I'll do it 2 or 3 times before I finally get the confidence that like, I'm going to write to this person and I'm going to make them tell me no, or I'm going to let them tell me yes, but they're going to be thinking about what I do from that point on, hopefully. And so, just to go for it. And also to remember, you have to be your biggest supporter, because everybody loves you and they want you for themselves, right? They don't want you holed up in your studio making those paintings. They want to hang out with you because they're crazy about you, your friends, your family, everybody wants a piece of you. And so, you have to say, I need a little bit of time, but sometimes you have to say, if I don't do this, I don't make it a priority. I need people to understand that this is like, come knock on my door. I'll put my clothes on. I'll get back to painting. Or, but, I want to see you, but you're going to have to meet me here. If we're going to have coffee, it's going to be in the studio. You got to be flexible. But the idea that you make art as a priority so that people take it serious, and you have to invest, you might throw every dollar you make right back into your art supplies. And it's all worth it, that's what you're doing. I mean, if you're in it to be an artist, that's what you're doing. So you got to show that you support yourself by, throwing down on art supplies or whatever else, and that's no fun.
Really, really, really great words to live. I know that, that's advice. You're saying things that I have to constantly remind myself of. So it's nice to hear that. So,
Good.
Great advice. Thank you again. Thank you for being with us.
Of course.
If anybody wants to find out more about Sean StarWars, find him on Instagram. You've got SeanStarWars.com. You've got Woodcut Funhouse. You've got lots of ways to find him. I will list off his social medias and his website in the post on thelittleyellowbuilding.com. And make sure you check out all of our other artist interviews. We've been going around each week and featuring different Mississippi artists who all do very, very different things. Some that are just starting out in their careers, and some like Sean who have been more established and they're really doing things and they have a lot more of information to give. So check them all out. Everybody's got a point of view that's worth it. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Awesome. Good talking to you.
You too.